the perfect storm. Is the perfect storm happening in our trucking markets? We've got all of the things going on in the news. We've got non-domiciled CDLs. We've got English proficiency tests. We've got the work visas not getting renewed like they once before and all set to expire. Is that going to have a effect on capacity, on truck drivers? Will companies have to reduce their capacity because they can't find truck drivers? I think it will. The question is how much? What we have going on here is we're coming out of, I'll put the seatbelt on here, coming out of a pretty crappy market in all sectors, flatbed, reefer, and dry van. And the question is are we truly coming out? That's kind of what everybody's been talking about lately. It's when is this market going to end, and when are we finally going to get back to where rates are profitable again? And you know, the pandemic years ended up being pretty good for truck companies because this could be a tight turn here. It's jammed in here. Because of when there is what's the right term? When there is problems in the supply chain, it tends to be good for truck companies and probably more so small companies, especially companies that are based in the spot market. Spot market tends to always get a boost when there's disruptions in the market. That's something that we kind of know. That's what the experts always say, and I think we've experienced that. Definitely COVID showed us that was the case. And so the question is are we going through some more disruptions? And I think that's yes, because we've got tariffs going on. We've got a lot of reinvestment into our country with the Trump stuff. Whether you agree with him or disagree with him, doesn't really matter. That's what he's going to do, and it's going to disrupt things. It might disrupt it for good. It might disrupt it for bad overall in the economy. One thing that we have to conclude is that disruptions in spot market end up pushing rates up because more freight has to go spot market because there's interruptions in regular freight movements. So I'm not going to get into the discussion of whether I think what Trump's doing in our country is going to help the country in general. I'm more talking about what's going to happen in the spot market. And I think that anything that happens that disrupts things is going to raise the potential for getting better rates in the spot market. If Trump is doing something that will help our general economy, then not only will the disruption help, also the general public will have more money to spend on whatever, right? Whatever we're shipping. So, but for the short term, I think we can agree that all this disruptions could push rates up, or at least be a disruption from the regular stuff. So then we have all the disruptions with the English proficiency stuff. We have the non-domiciled CDLs being really scrutinized pretty hard, and they are cutting back on and not renewing all the foreign work visas and all. I don't know if that's the right term, but there is some stuff going on there where they aren't being as apt to renew those visas and everything. So what's that going to do to our market? What I'm kind of wanting to look at, or what I'm interested in talking about, is I think this could be a good time because we have had 3+ years. 3+ years of markets that have been depressed, markets that have been pretty crappy. We've had 3+ years of carriers pretty much losing money or barely breaking even. And so because we've had that much time of barely breaking even, first of all, a lot of carriers have gone out of business already. A lot of carriers will go out of business in the next few months. because you can't operate for that long taking a loss every single month. But also, we have to conclude for the ones that survive or the ones that never got in but are looking to get in at some point, we have to be closer to the recovery than we were in 2023, right? I mean, that's pretty obvious. If there's ever going to be a recovery, we are closer today than we were yesterday, and we're closer today than we were in 2024. So I think that we're not in a spot where you could, hooray, the market's coming back, we can go buy new trucks and have big payments and expect to just make a ton of money. I think that we're still going to have to be very, very wise in how we operate, very, very wise in how we purchase vehicles, very, very wise in fuel mileage. Every aspect of our company we need to be wise in. But if we can get into business, and if we can write a business plan to where we can survive in this current market, I think flatbed rates are hovering between $2.15 a mile to $2.20 a mile. Dry van rates, I think, are in the $1.60 to $1.65 a mile. So it's pretty low, but if we can operate at that, if we could point to our numbers and say, look, we can survive at this. Not only can we survive, but we can make a little bit of profit while taking care of our truck, while replacing tires, while replacing brakes. We can survive, we can make a little profit. If we can do that, this could be a really good time for someone to get into the market, because we have to conclude that we're not going to go down from here. Right? Anything can happen, and you could be screwed entirely by getting in and then have another downturn for another year. So it's always risk. There's always risk involved in getting into business, opening a small business, whether it's a restaurant, a gym, any sort of small business. There's always risk involved. So we're never going to mitigate that. Can we point to some key areas where this could be a good time? And I think we can. We've been at a depressed market for 3 years. If history is an indicator, typically downturns in the freight markets don't last, all that long. I think the norm is 2 to 3 years. So we're coming up on, we've been in a depressed market for a long time. So we're probably going to start to see signs and start to point to, there's a better than average chance that we start coming out of this bad market and we start getting into a good market again. The other thing is the rates really are not, the rates that we have don't really indicate that we're in a bad market. The reason that we're in a bad market is not necessarily the rate per mile. If we look back at 2019 was a pretty standard year, pretty average year before the pandemic. And the flatbed, or sorry, the dry van rates and the flatbed rates, I think were lower than they are right now. So technically we are better than an average year. The thing is that we have to remember we've had dramatic inflation over 2019. So we would expect to see some increase in rates just to keep up with inflation. The other thing is we've had a lot of, inflation in the trucking industry, but specifically we've had insurance go up, we've had cost of labor go up, cost of parts go way up. There are more parts on today's trucks that break, and every one of those parts is more expensive. I don't know if we can say that we break down more often. Some people would say we do because of all the parts. We have more complexity of systems in our trucks today than we did in 2019, but not really, because I'm driving a 2019 truck. So it was built in 2019. So, I don't know if we can say they necessarily break down anymore, but everything's going up. When we do fix trucks, it gets more expensive than it was probably in 2019. The average Kenworth dealership in 2019 probably billed out about $120 to $135 an hour. I'm guessing here, I don't know, I haven't looked up the numbers, but today I think it's over $200 an hour. We can find some that are down in the 140 to 160s in small towns, but in large cities they're $250 an hour. Denver's $250 an hour, Kansas City's $250 an hour. What was the other place that we had a truck? Somewhere up in, I think it was St. Louis, both sides of Missouri. So we do have increased costs overall, and that hits everything. Fuel costs today, this is basically the end of May. It's the last day of May, 2025. So fuel costs are pretty good. I mean, we can't really point and say fuel costs are expensive. They're pretty average right now. And, my discounts are putting fuel coming in quite inexpensive. So we can't really point to fuel being a real thing. So because of all those expense side, it makes the rate side need to go up above what's average. So technically we are above average, but it needs to go up more to be able to keep up with all of the expenses. So is it a good time to buy a truck? I don't know. That's going to be up to you. I think some of the market indicators are pointing to the fact that it could be a good time to get into business, could be a good time to buy your first truck, buy your second truck, expand the business a little bit. It's not going to come without risk. There's risk on everything. And I think trucking companies experience a hell of a lot more risk than other small businesses, but all small businesses have risks associated with opening and increasing, and especially if you're dealing with getting loans. Most people are not going to be able to afford a $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 truck buying in cash. So most people will be putting some of it on financing. That makes it even more risky. So it's going to be an individual case situation. I'm not going to tell anybody it's time to go buy a truck and expand and be my competitor, but it could be a decent time if you've been thinking about it already, if you're fairly well off financially and can afford to take a little bit of a hit if it doesn't work out. It could be a good time to consider it at least. I think that we still need to, where it's not going to be pandemic years. We're not going to be getting $3-4 a mile. We're not, and the difference with the pandemic years is it wasn't just that the rates were higher. It was that the rates were higher everywhere. So there wasn't a bad market. It was profitable lanes any way you go. Any direction you drive was profitable. Whereas today, one lane could be extremely profitable, the other lane could take all of your profit. So it's very strategic right now. You've got to pick and choose where you drive, because if you drive to the wrong spot, you're going to give up all of the profit you just made on the last load. And so that's the real difference. Can we go find $3 a mile freight for drive-in? Yeah. The problem is it goes to places that we're going to take all of that profit just to leave. So it's very strategic, very, I guess I could call it very one-way freight. So if we have $3 a mile one way and then we have to deadhead back, that's $1.50 a mile. So that's where we get to this low revenue of $1.60 a mile. Yeah, we can do $3, $2.80, $2.50 one direction, but then the next direction is $1.20. So we have to be strategic and kind of bebop around to be able to make those lanes work. And when we do that, we reduce our miles per month because we're being strategic and we're picking and choosing and we're waiting possibly. So our revenue per week, per day, per year is going to be lower than it was in pandemic years, because in pandemic years we could go anywhere. We could do coast to coast and make $2.80 a mile. I did it with a drive-in. I did like a 3-week period where I did $2.80 a mile coast to coast, long hauls, and one load after another, no problem booking. Everything was available, and the rate was there. Today that can't happen. We can get $2.50 a mile one way, but not the other way. So that's the concern we have right now in the market. In the flatbed market, we have pretty good rates, but again, very one-way freight. So that is the problem. I guess the conclusion of, is it time to buy a truck? It's going to depend on you. It's going to depend on if you're financially stout enough to take the hit, if you're if you're able to get good terms on financing, if you're able to thread the needle on all of the aspects of trucking, you've got to get great fuel mileage, you've got to buy a truck that's spec'd properly, you've got to understand maintenance, you've got to understand admissions, you've got to understand freight and lanes, and have good conversations and communication with brokers. You've got to not get upset with the things that brokers do, which is very difficult, because sometimes as truck drivers we get very, very upset and take it personal when brokers do stupid shit. And we need to not do that, because those are our customers and we need to keep them happy. But we need to understand when it's time to negotiate and when it's time to take cheap freight, because cheap freight needs to be part of our equation for certain directions. We can't always have expensive freight. Or if we do always have expensive freight, we're going to be very, very minimal in how far we can drive. We're going to stay in this little tiny bubble, never leave it, which is great for your rate per mile, but not great for your revenue. And revenue matters in this industry, in this market. My view is revenue oftentimes matters more than rate per mile, because you can go broke doing $3 a mile if you are staying at 100 miles a day. If you stay at 100 miles a day, but you stay at $3 a mile, you'll go broke. You can't afford the insurance bill, let alone fuel, right? Let alone buying some food. You take a certain amount of food to eat each day, no matter how many miles you drive. So same thing with all your fixed costs. So sometimes and oftentimes revenue per day, per week, per month, per year is more important than your rate per mile. I really truly believe that, and I think that's a big disconnect we have with a lot of the owner-operators. A lot of the fleets, they get overly concerned about that rate per mile because that's how we track everything. But they don't consider revenue per day or revenue per week or revenue per month in part of the equation, because that needs to be high. We need to have high revenues, or we will go broke on our fixed cost side. So if you can nail everything and you understand all aspects of trucking, I think you could be extremely profitable in this marketplace. But you need to have a very, very wide knowledge base. And that's very difficult to do if you're a driver who's looking at becoming an owner-operator. How do you have experience on speccing out trucks and fuel mileage?
World in the West, I'm Bugstad. I don't have a name.
Forgot I had that on. Where was I at? So it's very difficult to have that experience when you haven't been introduced to that. It's very difficult to have the experience of how do you negotiate better fuel prices with your fuel discount program if you've never been in business. How do you have the experience to negotiate and look at your insurance bills? And also, if you're a brand new trucking company, you're not going to have many choices. You don't really have much negotiating power when it comes to insurance and fuel price and tire programs, right? So all of that being said, sometimes in that situation, it might be better to lease to a company that has that whole program already figured out. And I would say in a lot of cases, I would say most cases, it's probably better for a couple of years to go lease to a good company, even if the rate per mile or after your lease fee it gets a little bit crazy, or it's a little low after your lease fee, right? Even looking at that expensive lease fee, sometimes it's much better to start in business, get some experience under your belt, wrapped up in a system that has all those things already in the program. They've got good programs when it comes to fuel, good programs when it comes to tire discounts. They've got all of that stuff already in the equation. They know how, and they've got good programs as far as doing your IFTA taxes, all that stuff, plates, all that stuff. So, and a lot of people won't end up leaving. A lot of people don't have ambitions to run their own company as far as own their authority, because all of the taxes, all of the IFTA, all of the fuel cards and all that stuff is just a lot of headache, and a lot of people just want to drive. They want to make good money. They want to drive. They want to be home when they want to be home. They want to work when they want to work. They want to make their own schedule. They want to buy the seat that they want to buy and put in their truck. They want to buy the mattress that they want. They want to have all that flexibility of being the truck owner, but they don't really want all the headache of running the stupid company, right? And I think that's why the owner-operator space works really, really well. I love that space. I love that idea. And I think with the Trump industry, or with the Trump policies in this industry, we have, for a while, that independent contractor model was kind of under assault. But Trump's administration looks like he's not going to be, I don't think we have anything to worry about for a few years with the independent contractor model. I think we can get comfortable and lease to a company and be pretty comfortable that opportunity is going to exist outside of California. So anyway, that is what I want to talk about. Give me your guys' comments, see what you guys have to say about it. Have you been experiencing anything with all the stuff going on? Have you been experiencing rates going up in your segment? Have you been experiencing, maybe lack of capacity, maybe brokers freaking out trying to get loads moved because their main contractor or their main carrier is not able to do it, that sort of thing? Give me a comment and let me know what you guys are seeing in your marketplace, and let me know if you guys like this kind of content.